My name is Ima Bong Akbanita.
And
It's a very interesting name with a very interesting spelling. I met a gentleman yesterday, one of the brilliant minds you'll be hearing from, and he said he really wanted to meet the person who had that name because it's so difficult. But it's not that difficult. So Ima Bong is the name. I work with the Center for International Private Enterprise. I manage our regional accountability, governance, and integrity programs across sub-Saharan Africa.
gentle.
And today you'll be hearing from very interesting young minds who I think everybody, we still in Nigeria. I'm from Nigeria, by the way. If you couldn't tell, most people tell once I open my mouth. But if you couldn't tell, I'm from Nigeria. And since I was maybe 5, most enterprises, banks, other types of companies, their branding mottos have always been the youth are the future or the children are the future. So today you'll be hearing from the future of Africa on how we, the people seated in this room and the demographic that we represent, can take charge of building integrity into our lifestyle, into our culture, into our business communities from a youth perspective. So without wasting any more time, I've been told we have just 30 minutes, and looking at the profiles of the individuals we'll be hearing from today, there will be so much to learn and so much to hear that we might just be running out of time. But let me get right to introducing our speakers today, in no particular order. Excuse me.
Bullshit.
All right. First, we have Mr. Thomas Nudi, who is a social entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and an aspiring professor and youth mentor. He is the founder of Nudi Empire Foundation, NEF, a community-based organization with the mission to transform and impact society positively through community service. His passion is largely focused on business leadership, community service, education, and the youth, where he seeks to transform the community and empower the young generation through mentorship for sustainability and development. Mr. Nudi holds a bachelor's degree in business and information technology and is currently pursuing a master's of arts in transformational leadership. He also holds several national awards for his exemplary performance and leadership, including the University Students Leaders Awards 2019 under the Africa Youth Leadership Forum, the Utumishi Bora Awards, please excuse my pronunciation, under the Hospices of the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, and the Kenya Youth Summit competition winner under the Youth Engagement Society 2018. Please put a gentle round of applause, or give a gentle round of applause to Mr. Thomas Nudi. Next, we'll be joined by Kevin Getobai, who is an experienced regenerative agriculture expert with a strong background in agroecology and project management. He currently works as the farm manager at Ololo Farm. He has trained farmers in Kenya and Uganda, including refugee farmers, on regenerative agricultural practices. He was recently recognized by the United Nations Global Compact Network as a 2024 SDG pioneer for his efforts in advancing and advocating, for SDG goals and promoting circularity in our agri-food business with the help of insects called black soldier flies. His efforts have seen Ololo Farm and Lodge committing to setting science-based targets of achieving net zero for scope 1 and 2 by 2030. Please, a gentle round of applause for Mr. Kevin Getobai. And last but not least is Mr. Fizel Abdi, who is a driven individual with a passion for ethics, integrity, and community development. He's currently a final year student at Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Criminology with a specialization in cybersecurity and digital forensics. Fizel is a dedicated student and a dynamic leader. He serves as the president of both Ethics Ambassadors Network Kenya and Kimathi University Ethics and Integrity Club, demonstrating his commitment to fostering ethical practices within his institution and beyond. Beyond academia, Fizel is actively involved in building ethical societies. His efforts were recognized with the prestigious Universities Award, a rare honor bestowed on a select few. He is also the recipient of the Anti-Corruption Advanced Certificate from the UNODC. Please, a round of applause for Fizel Abdi. Thank you. All right, so we're going to dive right in to our discussions today. And the people who are seated here, I think, are very well positioned. We have people who have worked as mentors with the youth, and actual students is here, somebody who is able to talk to current realities of the newer generation who is just breaking into the business community, as well as somebody who works very closely with those who are, in the same subsect of new business owners. So to start, I was so glad when the opening plenaries gave us all of that data, especially the gentleman from UNODC, who spoke about how the business community in Africa is made up of 95% SMEs, so smaller growing businesses represent the large majority of African businesses in Africa. Of African businesses. About 60% of the African population is also youth, which means more than half of that 95% is made up of new or younger entrepreneurs, business owners, whatever it might be, who are leading that. And so with Africa emerging in the global business space and Africa aiming and striving to be better or more integrated into global value chains, it is important that that foundation is solidified for the younger business members. So for our discussion today, excuse me, just going through my notes. Just a minute. Apologies. Okay. So for our discussions today, I'll be starting off with Thomas. Like I said during your introduction, Thomas has experience mentoring youth and really getting down to the realities of the challenges that they face in terms of knowledge gaps that there might be, transitioning from education into the business space, and other challenges that they might have experienced in terms of the realities of ethical challenges in businesses. So Thomas, in your experience as a youth mentor, what are some of the most significant barriers to youth entrepreneurs in Africa? And how, in your opinion, do you believe that integrity or the culture of integrity could help those entrepreneurs overcome the barriers?
Let me pass this over.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. In my culture, I would have called you Emma because I was telling Faisal that your name is a bit difficult to pronounce, especially for some of us because I'm from the lakeside. So allow me to call you Emma. So thank you, my fellow panelists, everybody in the room. As I've been introduced, my name is Thomas Nudi, the founder of Nudi Empire Foundation. I love referring to myself as a social entrepreneur. So yeah, so coming back to your question, allow me to begin off with something small, an analogy, because as a student from St. Paul's University, and also know St. Paul's University, it was a theological college. So there's something we call homiletics. So this is the art of preaching, or the art of preparing sermons. So in this particular class, there was a professor who was a professor of systematic theology, and people were doing presentations, and this one student stood up and said, and he was asked to do the presentation, and he asked the class, class, do you know what I'm going to talk about? And the class responded, no. So he went down and he went and sat down, and he said that even me, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Then he came back again, he was given a second chance, and the class, again he asked, do you know what I'm going to talk about? And the class said yes. Then he went and sat down and he said, because you know what I'm going to talk about, there's no need of me talking. Then the professor wasn't very amused and he told him, I'm giving you a last chance. So he came back again and he was asked to do his presentation. But when he came to the stage, he asked the same question again, class, do you know what I'm going to talk about? So half of the class said yes, half of the class said no. Then he said, for those who have said yes, you can teach the ones who don't know. But that is neither here nor there. The reason why I've started with that is because most of the things that we are going to discuss today have already been discussed on the other side, even when we were starting. But just to put matters into context, some of the barriers that personally as a youth mentor and somebody who has been in business for a short time, is most young people feel that they don't have the resources to engage in entrepreneurship. But in one of the courses that I did, it's called Christian Business Ethics. It is a university common course in St. Paul's University. And we had a seminar where we were being taught that entrepreneurship is not all about resources, but entrepreneurship is about the mindset. So most young people will say that I don't have money to start, I don't have the resources, I don't have the networks. But at the end of the day, it is about the mindset. So they'll say, I don't have the money, but what we try and encourage them is that, first of all, it begins in the mind. So entrepreneurship is a mindset, so you begin with an idea, and then the resources will follow later on. The other thing is you will find most of us, and one of the speakers in the morning said about copy and paste. If it works on the other side, then it can work on this other side also. But sometimes also it is good to do due diligence. It is good to do a feasibility study, because you'll find, especially in campus, because I also work at St. Paul's University, so you'll find a student opening up a hotel or a restaurant. Then another person sees this guy has a lot of customers. He goes ahead and opens the same thing. After some time, they end up shutting the whole thing. Because at the end of the day, I think three key important things to put in mind, even as you venture into entrepreneurship, three questions that normally comes to my mind and I normally tell the young people. Number one is, do you know what you're talking about? Even if it is a product or a service that you're offering. Number two, which the customers will ask you, do you care about me? Do you care about me? And the last one, which is most profound, and we have been discussing it since morning, is, can I trust you? So the aspect of trust is like a foundation, even in business, because when we talk about trust, that is where now again we talk about ethics. That is where again we talk about integrity, and that is where again we talk about transparency in whatever that you do. So in a nutshell, that is what I can say. I think we need a mind shift to change the mindset of these young people, to show them that it is not all about the resources, but it's just the mindset. So if your mindset is right, then I think everything else will fall into place. Maybe moving on swiftly to your second question on what can we do to ensure that we have integrity and inculcate that culture in the young people. For me, I think what comes to my mind when you're asking that question is a Japanese philosophy called Ikigai. For those who are aware about Ikigai, so Iki is, the name is divided into two. So Iki means life, and Gai means reason. So I think the biggest question that we need to ask ourselves, even as young people, why are we doing what we do? What is the drive of what is making us do what we do? So your reason for living, your reason for doing whatever you are doing, because if you get that question right, then it means the passion will follow, and you'll be able to do it in a good way. Because most of us, unfortunately, especially as young people, we don't know our purpose. We don't know why God created us and put us on this earth. So I think if we realize why we were put, and most of us we are called in different trades. Some of us are called to be doctors, some of us are called to be lawyers, some of us are called to be professors. But you need to know your calling and you need to do it to your best. Lastly, is there's a book I was reading that it is written by somebody called Thomas Erickson. Coincidentally, we share the first name. So the book is titled Surrounded by Fools. Surrounded by Fools. So he argues, Thomas Erickson argues that your perspective towards the people around you shows who you are. So if you think that the people that you interact with are fools, or for lack of a better word, then there's a high probability you're in the same bandwagon. But if you think that the people you're interacting with are intelligent people that you can work with, then you're still right. But the most important thing that Thomas Erickson argues is that nobody is a fool. Everybody has a capacity, everybody has an ability that has been bestowed on them by God. So it is upon us to see person A is bringing this on the table, person B is bringing this on the table. Because at the end of the day, no one has a monopoly of knowledge. So for me, I think even as young people, the most important thing, and I loved the discussion in the morning, is working together. Working together, the spirit of partnership. Because the best invention that ever happened was something called a joint venture. So a joint venture, somebody had a ship, the other one had goods, and they had to cross over the sea. So this person said, I have this merchandise and you have a boat, why don't we come together and take the merchandise on the other side so that we see whether we can make profit. So I think the most important thing, trust, integrity, and of course partnership is key in whatever that we do, even as young people. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask permission to forego the mic because I think our voices can project, unless those in the back can't hear us.
I think it's better when you
It's better? Okay, because we unfortunately have just one mic between the four of us, so we have to pass it back and forth. But okay. Thank you so much, Thomas. You hit on a few very important things. One major barrier to Africa generally, but specifically to young entrepreneurs, is access to finance, access to capital, to start off. There are several channels to capital, but one of the greatest channels to capital is investment through multinationals, through government agencies, through development partners. And unfortunately, or fortunately, one of the strongest determining factors for you to get investment or get any type of funding is trust. So now I'm going to move us into, because you've spoken now about how trust is one of the most solid foundations for a business. And we all know that. I think we all know, even in everyday interactions and, everyday business, trust is important. What I think many of us struggle with defining is how to build that trust. How young businesses can, or young entrepreneurs can build that trust. So, Kevin, in your experience, especially, I did do a bit of reading on you, and I was very amazed by the work that you've done with the farmers. I'd like to know, in your experience, because you've also encouraged some cross trading, amongst them. How is, or what is a practical solution, especially for young, newer generation entrepreneurs who are entering the market now, to begin imbibing or building up on that culture of trust, especially in terms of business?
Thank you very much, and good for you to do the background checks. So I'm really proud of the work that I'm doing, and I'm proud to call myself a farmer because I was born in a farming community. I intentionally or just by accident still fell in the same corner of wanting supporting farmers. I usually tell people I had this dream once when I was about 10 years. I watched TV, and somewhere in Samburu I could see livestock were dying and the land was just bare, and people were following them and dying because they had no food to eat. So I in that dream, I thought when I grow up, I just want to make the landscape green and see the livestock flourish and the people have food. So and things happen, and I found myself going into ag school and ending up in a small farm that I work now as the farm manager, called Ololo. So, but after that, I've been intentional in wanting to support like-minded farmers or individuals or businesses that want to venture into farming or support the agri-food sector. So it's interesting that we're talking about trust, because trust is a key element of organization culture or individual culture. So trust is also a two-way process. So in order to build this trust that we're talking about, to break the barriers of small and medium-scale enterprises, which are the biggest, as you've had, in terms of numbers and in terms of percentages in Africa, is that we have to build a good organization culture. So I've been lucky enough to in my 5 years experience of working, to work in very interesting organizations. One of them is the farm that I've said, and I've also had the opportunity to work in a development organization that is supporting these farmers in terms of giving them finances. I've also got the opportunity to work with NGOs that are supporting farmers to train farmers. So that just gives you a holistic way of being in all the different sections in terms of the biggest challenge of SMEs being these issues of building trust and getting these finances from these people who are giving finances, and also building this culture of internal trust that they could be able to support themselves, but also most importantly attract a market. Because I sort of when I train farmers, one of the most important thing as in regenerative agriculture is that you have to be sustainable. Sustainable in the sense that you have to think of a way that that farm or business will be able to create revenue or sustainably give you money without the support of other people. So I always try to train these farmers to become self-sufficient or develop a business model or a strategy in a way that their business is going to sustain themselves with the support of these external people. So the second thing is they have to build an organization culture that will support them to sustainably get finances or support, not just from financial partners, but from the market, and also to get long-term partners who would want to work with them. A classic example is the farm I work with is a small farm, and we've come a long way and had fairly a lot of challenges. And one of the reasons we're still staying afloat, because if you check statistics, most SMEs or SME innovations will drop 5 years, a max of 5 years. 50% of them will collapse just because of the challenges of the culture within the organization, but which is strongly bounded by the integrity of all this. I know that I'm just talking on a general sense, but there are a lot of nitty-gritties in there, but it's all bounded by the integrity of this organization or the partners they are working with. So that is how most of the SME innovations have failed. So within our business, it's a farm. So you know how challenging a small farm can be, because we are all consumers of food. So most of this food is coming from these small-scale farms and SMEs that are trying to just turn a profit. So as a farm that main business is livestock, producing meat, livestock feed is very expensive. It's very expensive. Even at a commercial level, we still see that as a big expense. Even when you're turning a small profit, you still if you're spending 70% of your cost just on input, then that is a lot of cost on your side. So and the other challenge within that that we've tried to address as an organization is how can we internally, in order to solve this problem, build, mentor ourselves or our team to be able to have that capacity to innovate. So within that firm, before we think of getting support from outside, we've been able to get innovative. So we are innovating around SDGs and saying like this, how this problem is related to the global goals and how best can we love this problem to come up with a sustainable solution within ourselves. And then how can we demonstrate this to other partners so that they can be able to support us in this journey. So, and we can't talk about trust without talking about leadership within this organization. Leadership is a key integral item in wanting to promote integrity and also sustainability in SMEs. So with leaders who have clear vision, leaders who have the intention, they know clearly in their mind, this is what we are set to achieve, and this is what we will do, and this is what we will not do. And then with those kind of leaders, you'll be able to overcome simple integrity challenges, like of getting extorted or offering a bribe. So if you have leaders who are clear in their mind that giving a bribe is not a good thing, then that will never happen within that SME. Because the challenge, one of the other challenge that is crippling most of the SMEs is either getting extorted or giving a bribe, and that makes the cost of doing business even difficult for them. So building a strong leadership with a clear mind on what to do and what not to do is a very important pillar in building trust even within the employees. So the employees will look at the leader and say, if our leader is clear about not doing this and doing this, then they will easily follow and promote that within the team. So, and lastly, just to mention is, in order to build trust, you need mentors. So one wise man once said that it's easy to learn from the mistakes of our peers and advance on that. So it's always good to get mentors, people who are ahead in the game, to learn from and not repeat the same mistakes of how you went through that journey. And as a firm, we've been lucky to be, as a small firm, we've been lucky to be members of the UN Global Compact. They have, the UN Global Compact is led by, it's a principle-based, takes a principle-based approach in terms of advancing or supporting sustainability among corporates. And they have a portfolio of knowledge, and they are mentoring several SMEs and corporates on how they can integrate this in their day-to-day business. So as an SME, either join UN Global Compact. I've learned also in the morning plenary and the initial discussion, there are a lot of other organizations that are supporting SMEs and individuals in terms of building their capacity and mentoring them. So this mentorship is a very strategic pillar in wanting to build trust within your organization and also across to partners. And this will strengthen your ability to even be able to approach markets, to convince consumers. Because UN Global Compact, for example, the last principle number 10, is on how they can build your capacity in terms of integrating and promoting ethical practices and stuff to avoid with, you make sure that you're not engaging at all in terms of extortion, bribery, and those all kinds of manner of corruption. So just to summarize the many things I've said, I know I can't be an octopus. As a farmer, I love to do many things, and I can keep many things in my discussion. Just to give you a bit of a summary is, so as I started by saying, in order to build trust, we need to understand trust in two angles. Trust is a key element in organization culture, and is likely to follow. So get it wrong and you'll be among those organizations that are going to fail. So we all know a lot of organizations have failed. So yes, I'll leave it at that, and we can discuss further as things roll out.
Excellent. Yes, please. Go, please. Excellent. Thank you. You made so many. I was trying to make notes without being obviously on my phone here, but you made so many solid points there. And to summarize in how I've processed them, you spoke about making integrity a process that everybody follows. For me, that's standardizing the culture of integrity through systems, policies, procedures. So setting up a functional governance system, no matter how small a business is, which means everybody from the smallest auxiliary staff to the leadership knows that these processes are there and the processes work. Then you also mentioned ensuring leadership themselves are tapped in, because if your leadership is committed to integrity, then they are able to enforce from the top to the bottom. And then you mentioned surrounding yourself with like-minded businesses, which is close to what Thomas had mentioned as well, about ensuring that the businesses you deal with horizontally, so your partners, and the businesses you deal with even vertically, which many African businesses are afraid to do, demanding integrity from your donors, from your investors, is something that we haven't done very well in the past in Africa. For me, I would say because the culture of integrity is not yet in us, we're unable to enforce it or demand it when we come to those situations. It makes us particularly vulnerable to issues of corruption when dealing with, a big brother company, an investor, a multinational. And the last thing that you said, which is super important, is mentorship. Mentorship. For me, I would go a little further to just say building knowledge through mentorship networks, through schools, through other educational platforms. And with that, I'll come to you, Fizel, because I'm learning. I was speaking to the gentleman who came from UNODC and letting him know I'm very interested in understanding the UN's approach to involving youth in anti-corruption, especially youth in the business space. Because I was in a conference last month and we were speaking about how education either helps or destroys the culture of integrity in young children. And the arguments there, or the consensus there seemed to be that we're starting to teach and enforce integrity too late when people are formed. And I said, this translates directly into the business space. We're teaching business leaders who have been in business for 15 years doing things a certain way that, you suddenly have to change and you suddenly have to have integrity. When you have the younger generation, the new business leaders who are straight out of school and going into these programs where they're engaging with, things like an ABEC, where you're engaging with business leaders, at this point is where there really needs to be action. So my question to you, Fizel, is in the education space, now this might be business education or generally in the education space, how do we practically begin to instill integrity? Because I know in a lot of schools across Africa, there's things like moral instruction that's taught at a lower level. At the business school level, there's ethical business. And we learn and we write and we take exams and we pass. But when it comes to practicalizing what you've learned in the business space, we struggle. So in your opinion, how do we go beyond just passing knowledge to passing practical, applicable knowledge, so that when you're faced with a real-life situation of corruption, a young business leader knows how to handle that situation effectively?
Thank you, Imabom. I hope I pronounced it
Perfect.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Young man, there. Good afternoon. I think you're sleeping. You're good. Nice. My name is Faisal Abdi Hassan. For the student at the University of Technology, president of our school Ethics and Integrity Club, and then on national level, I'm the president of Ethics Ambassadors Network. As Imabong has clearly stated, UN, especially UNODC, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, they've been doing stuff for the past, 3 years. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption, it provides Article 13, and actually Kenya was one of the first signatories to the convention. Now the article calls for education program that fosters non-tolerance to corruption and encourages the state members to start their the ethics education in their school curriculum. Now UNODC, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, they came with Global Integrity Education Project.
Okay.
They called upon academicians from different universities, stakeholders in the industries, and they came up with modules. So essentially, the modules were supposed to be trained on the lecturers. Then in turn, they teach in their common units in the universities. Now the graduate trainees who are here, I think in this table and that table, they are called ethics ambassadors. It was an ambitious project, and it still is. We hope that when they are placed in the respective workplaces, now they embody the ethics and integrity aspect, and they teach others. So as a network, what we're doing on the ground is we've noticed our school programs, they are more theories than practical. And our constitution, our new constitution 2010 that was promulgated in 2010, it has national principles and values, and the government in itself is trying to have ethics and integrity clubs started in most universities, secondary schools, and even primary in Kenya. So we are working with them. To actualize that dream. So one thing we realized when we are interacting with the young people especially is lack of knowledge. You see, when us as youths we are confined as seen as victims or perpetrators to this vice corruption. And one thing about the youth is if you don't know what corruption is or the effect of corruption, or now there's something called carding, you'll just be confined to complaining. So we started visiting primary schools, secondary schools, and even universities to have a constructive talk on ethics and integrity. And hopefully through interaction that we have, we've interacted with stakeholders on the ground, the likes of SIDE, KEPSA, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, UNGC, and we are learning things. And an interesting thing is, for example, here in Kenya, 70% of the population is under 30%, under 35 years old, and it's approximated that 40% of our startups here in Kenya is youth-led. And we are actually in the continent, we are number one in venture capital. But for last year, we received around $800 million. But despite that influx of cash, 400,000 SMEs, they go under annually. So it's a duty of us, first of all, we inculcate ethics, then we embody it. Because you see, corruption is systematic. It's everywhere. It's embedded everywhere, especially in the public sphere. But it's not just in the public sphere. If anything, there's a great influx between private corruption and public corruption. So we hope that our people, especially the Ethics Ambassadors Network, it's an ambitious project, as I said before. We are planning to do amazing things, especially come next year. And our team is mainly focused on school. This is school, which is the most significant socializing experience we have, should play a very critical role in fighting corruption. Because ideally we go to school to prepare us for adulthood. That's why we are taught various subjects like mathematics and skills. But what we ideally do not receive is ethics education. So that's where us as a network, we are really focused on that, and we hope to build an ethical society both within our university and beyond. So the question may arise: is education or you're going to...
Yeah, go ahead.
If education is an enough tool to fight corruption. So personally, I don't believe so. Because when you turn on the TV, it is Dr. Someone, engineer someone, stole this amount of billions. And you may take two perspectives. Some are premised by religion, and others by sheer ignorance, I think. You may find someone at Shamakoko. Shamakoko is a rural area in Kenya, who is uneducated. Chances are he's ethical than someone who has MBA in business or something. And an interesting stat that actually I found in earlier discussion: 74% of Kenyans they have post-secondary education, and there's a research done by Aga Khan University student, and it say 50 to 58% of young learners are willing. No, they don't mind getting the money. They don't question where they get the money as long as they are not in jail. Yeah, and there's a Kenya Youth Survey report by East African Institute. It revealed 50% of us here in Kenya do not we are involved in bribe just to achieve our goals. And it's really interesting because, as you said before, it transcends from us being students because we are coming in the market and entering the private sector. So I think we need a collaborative action. And I'm sad in the earlier session they were talking about collaboration action, but in two aspects, public and private. No one mentioned the youth. And I think we play a very critical role. And suddenly, I don't think the youth aspect is given that attention. Even you can judge by the whole here. It's not that full. We need to look at the youth inclusion thing holistically. Not just our voice. We must be called upon when drafting policies, because it touches our life. Yeah. And if you saw in the media, July 25th, when there was a citizenry participation, people were on the street, and we are good in that, especially in education. There's a National Youth Dialogue Forum in UN complex the other day, and an interesting thing that was mentioned during the protest, young people were translating the provisions that were being submitted as a bill in various dialects, and it was transmitted online. So I think education plays a very critical role because it breeds innovation. And for me, I always say corruption is not the problem, lack of innovation, lack of development is the problem. Because development breeds scarcity, everyone for himself. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It's appreciating. Thank you so much, Fizo. You touched on so many important things. I was just mentally making notes, but very, very many important things. We don't have a lot of time, and I would have loved us to go a bit deeper into the conversation to really get into the responsibility and, positioning the youth to really take more responsibility. But you've started to touch on that. I wouldn't say the youth aren't represented. I know the conversation in there was public and private, but I would say that the organized public and organized private sector representatives have the responsibility of ensuring there is youth inclusion. So from the business perspective, ensuring that youth business leaders are always represented in whatever gatherings or discussions are there would be the way to, and same for the public sector. Although in Africa, many of us live in gerontocratic countries where you have to be 70 and up to be in any leadership position.
True.
So it's an important and nuanced discussion for us. But I thought it was very important that you said there was a lack of knowledge, a lack of know-how And to close us off, I think we can, because we've been told to round off. But I'd like to hear from you all about creating platforms, and I'll give a bit of a foundation before we dive into that. In 2017, SIPE conducted a research that found that majority of the small and growing businesses, or of the private sector generally, large businesses inclusive, who were leaning towards being businesses of integrity and operating with, accountability in all their business operations, they wanted to, but they lacked the capacity to do so. So they wanted to be able to stand for integrity, be able to kick back whenever they were requested to give bribes or whatever the condition was, be able to stand in advocacy against any issues of regulators, but they lacked capacity to do so. And so we realized, okay, in order for us, like you very rightly said, this is not a public sector issue. And that's really the foundation on which ABEC operates. It's helping us seated in this room be able to recognize the power that we have as the business community to make a change against corruption. And when we realized, so there was a want to make a change against corruption, or to take a stand against corruption, but there wasn't know-how. We established a network of change agents currently in about 13 countries across sub-Saharan Africa that are mandated with the sole mission of providing knowledge and consulting, capacity building support for businesses in Africa. So businesses who are new, the newer generation businesses, or businesses who have been existing but just have not been able to do it right, that network is there to support them. And I know that there are various other networks, but when we talk about collective action and working together, in just 1 minute, and I will go around in the same way that we did before, how would you suggest for the representatives of the network who are in the room, representatives of development partners who are in the room, representatives of networks like the ethics ambassadors who are in the room, how would you suggest we start collaborating to develop platforms that are specifically to support helping small, I keep saying small and growing businesses, but helping African businesses, because majority of us are small and growing, but helping African businesses to standardize their operations and really get to that point where, number one, they're able to imbibe doing things the right way, a culture of compliance in their businesses, thereby giving them access to better investments, better partnership options, and the realistic opportunity of being integrated into global value chains. So we can start from Thomas.
Thank you once again, Emma. I think from where I sit, such platforms like the one that we are having right now, I know time will not be enough, but I believe such platforms are to provoke our minds so that the discussion can continue in terms of how do we move forward, even in terms of trying to inculcate and change that culture of corruption in our country. But I think the most important thing, because you talked also about the capacity building, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of even proposal writing. When we are preparing the young people to do their proposals, let's say their presentations, their pitches, just to get support. So I think it needs to be given more time, more training, and of course, as Kevin had mentioned about mentors, getting mentors, because at the end of the day, they normally say that your strength is measured by the number of shoulders of giants that you step on. So you cannot stand alone, and it also takes time, because for me, I believe everything is a process, and unfortunately for most young people, we normally call them, we are called the microwave generation. So we want instant things, we want instant things. So we don't have patience. Even to, if you start a business, after 1 year, 2 years, you feel that you're not buying that Mercedes that you want, you close it down and you start another one. So I think we need to have more patience and build, because it takes time. Even the people who have been there, they tell us that it took a while before they got to where they are. So for me, I think mentorship is important, and of course training holistically and all-rounded, not just one area. Because when you're doing the proposals, for example, when you're doing the writings, they need to be excellent writings and presentations. So yeah, that would be my take. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So interesting that to hear that there is already like a community of champions for promoting integrity and responsible business. So, and I would just want to say one specific thing that we are committed as a firm to do. So we believe we've come a long way in terms of learning and trying to become a responsible business. So one of the opportunity or platform we're trying to create is going beyond internal efforts and wanting to create an actual physical hub where people, because our farm is an open farm, for most of people know us because of the lodge, because we're also a lodge, and we've been open in terms of even if you're just visiting to have lunch, we encourage people to come at the back and see where their food is coming from and learn on how who is farming their food and how it's being farmed. And in terms of the practices that we're doing within our team, and we're making an intentional effort to build a physical platform, a hub, where like-minded people, starting from our own organizations, people who are championing at team levels, at management levels, to have a platform where they can showcase. So when you come to the farm, you can visit the hub and see how far or the journey we've taken to come this far. I will appreciate if we can have those champions to come and invite them to be part of this platform so that they can be able to showcase. And we're looking to seek support from the UN Global Compact. We believe they'll be very strategic partners because they have, you see from the morning presentation, they have quite a number of participants, even just in Kenya, so that we can get, these are already community of practice, people who are already converted in this. And if we get an opportunity to host some of the champions there, then they can physically share knowledge together as peers. And we see a lot of opportunity in terms of in-person sharing. And that is what we want to build on. So I will just want to share that at the moment.
Thank you, Kevin. So my perspective on these startups, how we're going to ensure they're getting investment, they are in tandem with compliance, is I usually tell like Ben, I've interacted with Ben quite a lot. The private sector, they're usually ahead. The government and the public sector usually play a catch-up game. For example, the private sector, they sponsor the primary arts bid here in Kenya, which was amazing. But what I usually advocate for is there's a ACTO rule here in Kenya where it's how people do business with the government, and 30% of doing business with the government is reserved for vulnerable groups. That's the youth and the women and the person with disabilities. But here, Kenya being Kenya, is that doesn't happen. So if private sector advocates for that measures to be put to be a little bit strict, because as you know, procurement area is a high risk area. The government being the largest procurer here in Kenya, and that's where the private sector usually come in as the supplier in the corruption. So I usually advocate for private sector to push bill that supports the youths. And Kenya has been grey listed again after a decade of getting out of the horrible grey list. And that what happens is, for example, the US and the British, I think, and the France, they have Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which investors, of course, they'll be afraid because the whole supply line, if you're caught doing corruption there and you're still in US, you'll be fined big money. And who are getting into these startups? It's us, the young people. And we need the investors to invest in us. So my call to African youths, I hope they can hear me. We have one thing that the previous folks, they didn't have, which is social media. You see, as youths, we are homogeneous. We come from different perspectives. We have different backgrounds. Imabong, she's from Nigeria. I'm from Kenya, especially the northern part. But what interconnects us is social media. And that is a very powerful tool that will educate the young people on ethical business practices and also what involves us. For example, public participation. Yesterday, I had the privilege of attending a startup integrity initiative, a very robust upcoming startup led by a very robust young lawyer. And I interacted with a young gentleman from Chamber of Commerce. And he was telling me that there are 3 bills that are being submitted in the parliament right now that will touch the lives of the youths and the startup. And he politely asked, do you know about it? I'm like, no. Actually, I didn't know anything to do with Kenya National Chamber of Commerce. So what I proposed to him is you should have a social media presence. For example, I have a TikTok. Announce there's a bill coming. And I'm pretty much sure, just like July 25th, there will be citizen public participation, and the startups hopefully will not go under the start that I gave earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause? Thank you. So as we close today, I will remind us of the remarks that we had from our Deputy Regional Director earlier, which is we shouldn't just talk. We've talked very eloquently today, gentlemen. You've listened eloquently. I know some of you might have had some contributions you wanted to add. Excuse me. Unfortunately, we do have to close out the room now. But we've spoken today, and we shouldn't just speak. We should start to interact from the moment you leave this room. Interact with those of us here and see how you can begin to turn the conversations we've had into action. So thank you all very, very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference.